Hey everyone, Andrew Stromer here, and I'm going to give you 7 filmmaking tips. These are going to be 7 things that filmmakers usually forget about that make a huge difference in your videos or help streamline the whole process. So starting off with, you need to be shooting for black bars. So if you're putting black bars on your B-roll, when you're shooting it, you need to remember that they're going to be there. So it might mean you need to shoot a little bit wider because usually we cram everything we want to see in the frame in the entire screen. But when you have black bars, you have the top and bottom getting cut off. I found that sometimes when I put black bars on it, I have to cut the shot or not have everything of that subject in the shot that I wanted to just because the black bars cover it up. My biggest tip for how you do it is tape your screen where the black bars would be. Either put a clip of video that has black bars on an SD card and play it on your camera, but some cameras, they have a creative mode on there so where you can put fancy filters in camera. That's just the modern cameras and not even all of them, but if you have that, you could use that too. Some of them might have the black bars so you know exactly where to tape over. So I can still see through the tape what's all in the shot that I'm getting at that moment, but I know where the tape line is where the black bars are going to be, so I know what's getting cut out of the shot. Tip number 2 is to shoot for transition. So when you are taking a shot of B-roll or whatever it is, if you do fancy transitions like masking, like for example, you have a tree going by and you want to mask at the edge of the tree into the next shot, or if you're doing some kind of fancy fade thing, so where you have your camera and you're flicking it around, so you do the shot and then you flick it into like darkness or a certain texture or something, so then you can seamlessly cut it. You need to shoot for those transitions, because if you don't do the whip when you're getting the shot, you can't do it super well in post. You need to remember what kind of transitions you're looking for while you are recording the shot. And then if you shoot one shot with a transition, you want to remember what it left off on, so then you can take some similar texture or color object and then bring it back into the next shot, so you know that those two shots can link up and be that transition. Because, you know, if you do one transition and you don't have one bringing it back, you can't use the fancy in-camera transition in the first place. Also, to go along with that, remember if you were looking up or you were going sideways and down or something, that you need to be doing the same motion when you come back into the next shot. Adding depth to your shots really sets you apart from other filmmakers. Depth and shallow depth of field and having foreground, subject, and background, all that stuff, that makes your shots look so much better. Most shots that you think are just beautiful B-roll, I bet you 98 to 99% of the time they have a ton of depth in them. And how do you get depth? Shoot through everything. So if you're out in nature, take a branch, shoot through it. It gives you some nice bokeh in the foreground. If you have lights for nighttime, shoot through the lights, bring them around, do fancy things. If you're like Brandon Wolfel doing night photography, get some prisms, put them in front of your lens. It makes some crazy like light flares and all kinds of weird stuff, and it's super cool. So remember to shoot through everything. Tip number 4 is knowing what attracts the eye in a shot. I know movement attracts and light attracts. So if you have a very dark shot but something is very bright, your eye will probably go to that. And if you have one thing moving in the shot a lot more than everything else, or if you have a static shot, the one thing that's moving is gonna draw your attention. When you're getting a shot of a subject, make sure there's not other elements in the shot distracting from it because it's brighter or because it's more contrasted or because it's moving. An example of movement is if you have a drone shot, you have this whole landscape, But if there's a car driving through, your eye's gonna go to that before the rest of the landscape. If your purpose of the shot is to capture the landscape, then you're gonna wanna get it without the car. But if you like the car as the subject for that shot, it might not be the subject of the entire sequence, but to show some perspective on the scale of the landscape, that's a really nice shot. The next tip is fog is your friend. Fog makes things have less contrast, but it gives a lot of mood to a picture or a video sequence. Whenever I've seen fog, I'm like, ooh, that looks super cool, because it's a completely different feeling than most photographers get. And I know even some photographers, they use the dehaze in Lightroom to get rid of the fog. I'm like, leave it in, it looks so much cooler. Another tip is that you can make custom bokeh. So everyone thinks you're stuck to bokeh in circles, but you're not. That's just how the lens is set up. This lens, it's circular. It's gonna have circular bokeh. You put a heart in front of it, and it's gonna make heart bokeh. You could make star bokeh, you could make whatever shape bokeh you wanted. So you just get a piece of paper, and you cut out whatever shape you want in it, and put it in front of your lens, and there you go. It's gonna take you a lot of tries. Like this one, I made it way too big at first. Like this is probably the biggest size I can get with having it actually have the heart bokeh. If you make it too big, it doesn't really affect the bokeh whatsoever, but you don't wanna make it too small because then you're not letting enough light in for the lens. My tips with using this trick though is get a very fast lens. So this is the 51.8, so it's a very fast lens. So it can take in a ton of light. So when you cut out a bunch of light with this, that you're not losing that much light. I've seen a lot of people, they just tape it straight to the lens. Well, guess what? If you get some step-up rings, you can tape it straight to the step-up ring, so then you can just screw it on for when you want and take it right off for when you don't want it. Also, that depending on where your focus is and where your bokeh is, like if your bokeh is in the foreground versus the background of where your focus is, it might flip the bokeh. If you have it this way, it might be upside down depending on where your focus is. So you will have to flip the heart upside down to make the bokeh right side up. Having it on a step-up ring is also really useful for that situation. So then if you see that it's upside down, you just turn the step-up ring. It's fine. It's not like you can only get bokeh in the background because of how you have it taped on there. Definitely get step-up rings when doing this trick. Also make sure that it's taped down all the way around so no light can get in around the side, because that'll mess it up too. Times that you'd want that, maybe you want a star or something for a Christmas shoot or a 4th of July shoot. Maybe you want a heart for a wedding or a dance or something. Those are a couple ideas for when you'd want to use this trick, just to spice up your footage a little bit more. The last tip is how to get up close water shots without getting your DSLR wet, or your mirrorless camera, or whatever camera you have. It's easiest to do with a DSLR though, because you can get a battery grip. So this thing on the bottom, it's a battery grip. You get extra battery life because you can put 2 batteries in instead of 1. How you get these type of water shots, like super close down to the water, like if the river is coming right here, you put one hand on the bottom of the battery grip, and then you just barely let your hand touch the water, and that's the level you get. You can see that's like a couple inches above the water, but it's enough to feel like you're right there. You know when your hand is touching that you want to be probably just a little bit above, so no water splashes up and hits it. But at the same time, if your hand sinks down a little bit more, or the water just happens to jump up over your hand, it's just gonna hit your battery grip, which isn't gonna destroy your camera. It's a lot easier to replace a $20 battery grip than a $2,000 camera. You might not be that worried about your camera getting wet, but the thing is, if it's not weather sealed, which by the way, your body and your lens have to be weather sealed, water might just hit your camera and go off or whatever, just evaporate or knock out the jack in the side or something for a few minutes or whatever, but you don't want it getting in between here, because then it gets into where your sensor is and it can screw up your sensor, and then, you know, it's camera's broken, it's all gone. That's my 7 pro filmmaking tips that you need to remember. Like the last vlog, a bunch of stuff you need to know if you're a filmmaker or aspiring YouTuber. This isn't my typical video, it's just I have some knowledge that I want other people to be able to get some use out of. If you want more filmmaking stuff, there's a few videos on the channel. If you want to watch Let's Plays of games, then you can hit subscribe, but if you're looking for filmmaking stuff, don't bother. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.